I got to be a real producer. I got to go make deals for the actors, and it was really fun going to the agents and buying the actors. And I had this wonderful technique. I'd offer, say, a 10% increase on the actor as to what they'd got and I'd gotten before, and I'd say, you have until 4:30 to accept the deal, and then at 5 o'clock I'm cutting it $5,000. At 6 o'clock, $5,000 more. And of course, they never want to get back to you, and they'd usually get back to me the next afternoon. I'd say, well, let me see, we're down to such and such by now, And I made all these agents cry. I loved it. It was terrific,
My name's Wild Bill Kelso, and don't you forget it.
Wild Bill Kelso was actually a relatively minor character in the original drafts of the script, and he became a bigger character when John Belushi was cast to play him.
It was our intention that this character just came in at the end of the movie to add insult to injury. But then I completely understand that when someone like John Belushi gets cast, then he was a big star then, and he was added into more of the movie and became brought into the film earlier on.
Steven decided that he should put more of John Belushi in the movie, and did a couple of extra scenes where he got lost over the Grand Canyon and tried to open up Coca-Cola or the tomato soup or whatever it was, on all kinds of gags in his airplane.
Start.
You never knew what he was going to do. You never knew if he would stay with the script or make up his own dialogue, or he was going to turn to the left with a funny-looking extra that appealed to John's sense of humor that he might want to fold into the scene or not. You didn't know what John was going to do. And the moment where John was trying to get back on the airplane, and he got back on the wing of the plane, and he turned, and then there was a lot of morning dew on the wing, and his foot slipped, and he took a real header head first. Luckily, his fall was broken, but unfortunately, it was broken by a human being who happened to be standing there, and reached up and actually half caught John and half allowed John to land on him. And if you step down your version, you'll see the fall John took was a pretty serious fall, but John didn't get hurt. It didn't even faze him, and fortunately, the actor he fell on was not hurt. So. And it was a very natural fall, so I kept it in the movie. Working with John Belushi was in itself a motion picture experience. I mean, that's a whole other story. We would need a whole other laser disc to talk about that, because that was a whole other experience. I really loved John Belushi and had a great time working with him. And he was great to me and my family, and we got along great, and he's just an amazing talent. He's still missed today.
We went to watch the Blind Sword. What is it? Nothing really great, huh? I mean, I just saw her. Well, what do you know? That's so hot, huh? It's probably not bad. I heard you. Which one? In the car? Yeah. It was either real funny or real embarrassing. One of the two. It was, I don't know. It was weird. So I'm trying to. There it goes. You're right. Like magazine photographers who went to UCLA, and I'll prove it to you, Johnny. Kubrick, Coppola, all of them. Nothing about making movies. Not movies. Hey, more. Looks like the honeymoon is over.
Madness. It's the only word to describe it. This isn't the state of California, this is a state of insanity.
My first choice for General Stilwell was Charlton Heston. But my real first choice for Stilwell was John Wayne. And John Wayne and I had met at Joan Crawford's memorial service at the Academy. And we were sitting on a dais, and because my first professional job was directing Joan Crawford in a television pilot, Night Gallery, they thought it was appropriate to get the new generation to her memorial service, and I was very happy because I liked Joan. I liked my experience working with her on my first show. And of course, John Wayne was there, and John Wayne kept looking over at me like this, because I was at the time, I think I was in my 20s. I must look like I was in my teens. And Wayne made a bunch of cracks about who is this guy sitting here talking about Joan Crawford. He looks like, you know, my great nephew. And he made a lot of jokes about me at the time. And so we were able to meet backstage after it was over. And he came over to me and said, look, I hope you had a sense of humor, because I wasn't trying to hurt your feelings. I just, you know, had to say those things. I couldn't help myself. And I said, no, it was just great to meet you. And I need, you know, if you had knocked me across the room, you know, I would have still been happy to have made contact with you. And we were talking about John Ford, and we became kind of like telephone friends for not very long. We talked on the phone, you know, once a month, and I'd call him about ideas I had about movies, and I tried to get him to talk about some of his past works. And at one point, he even sent me a script that I think he had co-written that he wanted to do with Maureen O'Hara about a camel race in Morocco. It was an interesting script. 1941 came into my life about that same era, and I said, you know, I have a chance to direct this movie called 1941, and I would love to send you the script to see if you would consider playing General Stilwell. Well, he knew all about General Stilwell. He went on and on about what a great general he was. And so with great enthusiasm, he said, please send me the screenplay. So I sent him the script, and I must say he read it, I think, that day, because he called me the next day on the phone. And he was outraged. He thought it was the most anti-American piece of drivel he had ever read in his life. And he said, I'm so surprised at you. I mean, I thought you were an American. I thought you were going to make a movie to honor the memory of World War II. But this dishonors the memory of what happened. It's not even accurate. He says, I was around when those fake bombs fell out of the sky, and there was no panic in Los Angeles. There were some news reports on the radio, and that was about it. And he said, this is, and then he just tried to talk me out of making the movie. He said, you should never make this movie. Don't even make this film. He said, you know, he said, I'll be very disappointed in you if you wind up making this picture, because this is not, this is really sort of an anti-American film. I never saw it as an anti-American film, but he took great exception with that. We stayed friends. We stayed on the phone, and we just went on to other topics. Never mentioned that movie again. But the next choice was to go to Charlton Heston, who I believe also felt that the film was a bit of a slap in the face of America, or a pie in the face of America. And that's how I used to always think of 41. It was like a pie fight from the old silent movie era. And what's wrong about sticking a pie in the face of the Statue of Liberty from time to time, if it's in the spirit of humor? But I don't think Chuck Heston thought it was in that spirit as well. I didn't talk to Heston. Milius did, because he had the relationship with Chuck, and John just reported that Chuck had said no, in no uncertain terms. And of course, our next choice was Robert Stack, who probably turned out to be the greatest General Stilwell of any of the aforementioned actors, because he looks a lot like Stilwell, especially with the haircut and the glasses. He was a spitting image of Stilwell. And as he proved later in a very funny movie called Airplane, Bob Stack, when playing straight, but with funny material around him, is a wonderful humorist. He's such a fine actor anyway, Robert Stack, but he really knew how to handle the comedy, I think, in 1941. So I was so happy to have him in the film.
Dumbo. Sure did get to get my mind off things for a while.
And Stilwell actually did see Dumbo while he was in L.A. during December of 1941. So that's an actual true fact that he saw Dumbo. And we use that, obviously, in the movie.
Toshiro was acting like a drill instructor in the Marine Corps. He was, a lot of these extras were, you know, were just people who, you know, weren't extras. They were hired because they were Japanese, and they probably never been on a ship before in their lives. Even though they were on a fake ship, sitting in a tank on stage 27 at MGM, you know, they had to look and perform like sailors, and Mifune did not like the way they were undisciplined. So he asked me for permission to take over the direction of all the Japanese extras in the film, and I gave him permission.
And they were all kind of wise asses, and they were out in the parking lot. And the first time he got them out there, he went up to them and he got them standing up, and they were sitting there. And the first one he went up to, and he said, "This is the way that the Japanese officers drilled their men." And he went up to the first one, and he was And the guy came to attention. The rest of them came to attention, and from that day on, they were his. By the end of the movie, they would have all died in a bonsai charge for Toshiro Mifune. He was their emperor.
Bring on your tough horses, you never had one that would sit me to yes and no.
The original concept of the Japanese was that they would always stay on their sub. They never would leave their sub. Well, Steven and John got this idea about seeing the Japanese come into a hot dog stand and cut up hot dogs like sushi. And Steven also wanted to do his version of the old Three Stooges gag where the Stooges were dressed up as Christmas trees and go wandering around and are hiding out. And it was kind of a funny scene. And there was this farmer who happened into the place where the Japanese were cutting up these hot dogs, got scared and ran off, and that was the extent of his part. Well, Steven cast Slim Pickens to play this part, who essentially had no dialogue. And a week or so later, he was bemoaning the fact that here he had cast the world's greatest character actor, Slim Pickens, and there wasn't anything for him to do. He didn't have much of a part. And maybe Bob and I could figure out a way to expand this character so that it would be a part worthy of Slim Pickens.
Everything Stanley Kubrick has ever directed has been a personal inspiration for me. I wanted Slim Pickens in the movie so I could do the parody from Dr. Strangelove when Slim Pickens is going through the survival kit checklist. And of course he goes through the Cracker Jack box, and he also goes through the checklist of all the items that they're taking from his pockets. And it was a bit of both a send-up and an homage to those moments in Dr. Strangelove.
It was actually Brian De Palma who suggested that his name be Hollis Wood and do a sort of who's on first routine because the Japanese are looking for Hollywood, and Holly is short for Hollis, and everybody would call Hollis Hollywood, so they're asking him, where's Hollywood? And he's going, I'm right here, I'm right here.
Where Hollywood? Right here.
What?
You're looking at him.
Who?
Hollis Wood.
Where?
I'm right here. Shoot, can't you understand plain English?
Hollywood?
Huh?
Where?
Here.
Ironically, turned out to be a lot funnier than the original scene that Slim Pickens got cast to do, which was just this one thing with him running away from this little shack. So the trees sequence ended up not being in the release version of the movie, and all this other stuff did.
Hey, this grapefruit's rotten. I'm gonna throw it away. Is it all right with you if I throw it away? All right, I'm gonna throw it away. Here it goes. It's going, it's going, it's going, it's going, going, it's going, it's going. Wait.
Now, the interesting story about the two guys on the Ferris wheel,
Now don't say another word.
we envisioned Jackie Gleason and Art Carney playing them and sort of doing a Ralph Cramden, Ed Norton routine on the Ferris wheel. And we actually described the characters as one of them looks like a bus driver and the other one looks as if he might work in a sewer. And we wrote this great routine for him to do. And then we found out that they absolutely refused to work together. Jackie Gleason was contacted by Sally Dennison, the casting director, and he said, I'm sorry, I just will not work with Art Carney, which was really kind of sad. Subsequent to when we had written those scenes, Bob and I made the movie I Want to Hold Your Hand, and we discovered Eddie Deason. And Steven loved Eddie Deason, as do we. And so we wrote the part for Eddie Deason.
Oh, boy, my favorite. A bologna and clam sandwich smothered in garlic. You want some? What's the matter, pal? You got an upset stomach? Why, I got just the thing right here for a stomach ache.
What is it?
Buttermilk.
No, thank you.
Yeah, well, if he's not going to drink it, give it to me. My stomach's upset too.
Oh, you want some? All right, here it is. He says he wants more. Oh, lockjaw again, huh?
Hey, kinda hard on the little fellow, aren't you?
And when Murray Hamilton finally met Eddie Deason, Murray went up to Steven and he said, Steven, I'm not going to have any trouble playing this part. I hate that little bastard.
Hi, I'm Eddie Deason. Hi.
This experience was a no-holds-barred, sort of free-for-all, where anything goes. It's like that great song, Anything Goes, that we wound up using in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. I've always loved that song, and that was my theory and philosophy when I made 1941, that anything should go, which meant that if we wanted to put our friends in the movie, wanted to put our parents in the movie, it was okay. So it was a good opportunity Penny Marshall, was and still is a very close friend of mine, and so she agreed to do a day.
What's your real name, Sal?
Raoul.
I knew it.
Lipschitz.
And Lenny and Squiggy from Laverne and Shirley did a small cameo.
You hear that? Yeah.
Milius ran through it as a crazed Santa Claus firing a gun into the air.
This is the kind of movie that if you worked on it, you were going to be in it sooner or later, because it just sprawled all over everything. You couldn't help but get it on you, So I don't remember how that happened. I think that I showed up on the set, and Steven was always having me write things on the spot, because he always maintained that I wrote my best things right there, leaning over the hood of a car or something like that. So he'd say, do a scene like this, or do a scene. I think this was one of those scenes where he says, do a scene where Santa Claus comes up and shoots out the lights. And so I wrote the scene or whatever, and he says, now you be Santa Claus. And they outfitted me and gave me a pistol, and it seemed like a good idea at the time,
John used to do something at night in front of the car headlights. He would do a great Bigfoot being caught in car headlights impersonation that only Milius can do. So I dressed John up as Santa Claus. I said, by the way, do your Bigfoot impersonation as you see General Stilwell and you become so stunned, like being caught in the headlights of a car. You're caught basically under the gaze of the General Stilwell, and do your Bigfoot thing, which he did. It was hysterical, but it was so inside. Only I knew it was funny, and only Bob and Bob knew it was funny, that it was the kind of thing that it was better, left out of the movie. It was too much of an inside gag.
Lights out! Lights out!
We won't need the Japs.
Throughout the entire production, I kept saying, we're missing Fred McMurray. The one ingredient in 40 we're missing is Fred McMurray. Later, I wound up saying, we're also missing a lot of humor. We should make this comedy funnier. But that never came to pass.